Okay. All right. So now we're recording, and I'm here with Martin Atkins. Um, I got a chance to meet you briefly at the last Cold Waves, 2019.
Was it 2019 or was it 2018? I don't even because we
No, I
did. Yes, no, no.
that's
You're right. It was
2019.
2019
Yeah.
because then we
Uh,
did pig face. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you were well. The reason why I wanted to talk to you in particular was because I saw that you were a keynote at the USASP conference, which is an entrepreneurship education conference. And I'm like, wait a minute. When I saw the name coming up in the email, I'm like, can that, what, really? It's like, oh my God, my worlds are colliding. It's like I have my academic world, and then I have my music world, and now it's like,
You know,
right.
I was fortunate enough to force those two worlds to collide almost in my very first class,
Yeah.
which is close to 20 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
I love talking about this stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, thank you for taking some time to speak to me. I know you're busy with a million things, but I definitely appreciate it. And so I'm going to get the first question out of the way so we can get to even more
Okay.
fun stuff.
Okay.
And that's, what does music mean to you?
Well, that's
It's a tough question.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, especially now because I've made music
Mhm.
which is of my essence. It's not like, hey, we did a great track and you were on beat and your saxophone was amazing and but it's like, no, when you're in a studio, when somebody just we're rolling tape, then there's stuff in the ether that is the essence of each person's thing. That's quite true of early PIL. We didn't rehearse before going into a studio, nor did we have any ideas.
Mhm.
Not quite so true of Killing Joke, but there's an intensity there, and certainly true of Pigface, where the stuff that's inside of you comes out and mixes with other people's stuff. So music for me is different than a soundtrack to something. You hope that's what it is for somebody else
Mhm.
on the other end. For me, music is my social network. It's my business card. And that sounds like I've got, because in today's business world, no, I mean, it's my business card in terms of I am so shy that music has been that bridge for me to people.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also bittersweet now because I hear something, with me and Raven, with Paul Raven being the rhythm section, or William Tucker, or Genesis P. Orridge,
Mhm.
or somebody, and it's there's a different. Uh, it's not, hey, here's a kooky
Right.
track from some wild British, boom, take it away. It's like, oh,
Right.
you know, uh, and so what does music mean to me? Fuck yeah. Oh, am I allowed to swear? By the way,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
okay, I'm just checking, because it will be a nightmare edit otherwise. Um,
Yeah.
so 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 it means a lot of things. It has opened doors, um, socially, structurally, physically, mentally, academically, um, and it's kind of useful. It's almost like, in some ways, and so this isn't the essence of music, although maybe it is. I mean, I was hanging out with Charles Adler for 3 hours last Friday, and I don't suspect I would have gotten to do that if I'm like, hey, I'm working on a startup and we should have coffee. Like, no, we shouldn't. But the music,
Mhm.
the music, the weight of all of the music, pounds down a pathway to some people's doors for me, you know, and has created paths. So James Murphy from LCD. He was my first intern. So that I didn't have to pound a path to his door. You know, we had a connection in 1988, you know.
Yeah.
So without saying it's everything, it kind of is everything. But I also go through long periods of time where I don't listen to music
Mm.
because of all of that. There's some
Yeah.
music it's difficult for me to listen to without, you know, somebody just texted me, oh, I thought Rick Rubin produced that album. I didn't know you produced it. So I can't listen to the Process Skinny Puppy, for instance, without
Right.
like, oh, yeah. It's a shame that I felt that they were frightened of the string section that I brought in. You know, it's just it's everything and it's nothing, and
Yeah.
it's enabled things and it's also fucked up a bunch of things.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
yeah.
there's definitely, you know, you've got that connection. You know, everybody, I think, has that connection to it, right? You know, you hear something and it puts you somewhere. I think you talked about this in another interview, perhaps, is that, or maybe I'm getting all my interviews confused, but you know, that when you hear something, it puts you in a place, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I can see, you know, how, you know, in some cases, you know, hearing something, you know, can remind you of things that maybe don't want to remember, or just, you know, the difficulties of it. But it also, you know, there's going to be the music that gives you the
Right.
joy
Right.
and all
And
that.
they say that it's the olfactory senses that are the deepest, hardest wired connection to the brain and memory. But I think music is a second, and you combine the two, and now that's interesting.
Yeah. Throughout all the interviews I've done, you know, everybody is, you know, had their you know, answered the question, what does music mean? And so I concluded a while ago that music is the force. So if you think about everything the force is in Star Wars, that's what music is,
Mm-hmm.
right? It gives life, it can take life, it gives hope, you know, it permeates everything. It's always been there and always will be. You know, it's
Well, I hesitate with always will be, because, you know, having gone through so many changes in the music business,
Hmm.
you know, I don't. I think the perception, the shared experience of music that gives it its context and resonance sometimes, you know, I think that is starting to dissipate.
Hmm.
So what is it now? 75,000 songs a day uploaded to Spotify. So if you think about what is it, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where they sing the Queen song in the car?
Oh no, that's I know what you're talking about
The
though.
other one.
Yeah,
That's
Wayne's
that.
World.
Oh, okay, Wayne's World.
Wayne's World,
Right.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
so people had an experience with the song, and that scene in the movie kind of crystallized this, you know, amplified and memorialized this moment that a bunch of
Mm.
people had, and then that was amplified again by everybody having this shared experience of back in those days watching that movie at the same time at
Mhm.
the movies in a certain way. So then everybody's response was kind of da da da, you know, and then the same thing if it was on Channel 9 on a Saturday night. And now you can watch it anytime, and people can watch many other things on so many different
Right.
devices and channels, and or not watch anything, be doing something, one other thing, or whatever. I don't know. I'm sure there'll always be music. You
Mhm.
know, one of my kids, Cole, is 13, and he does these stop motions, and but last year during lockdown he made an album in between classes, you know.
Mhm.
And then here's this song. I'm like, oh, this is really great. I used to listen to a band from Tokyo called My Little Airport like 20 years ago, and it was really cool ambient
Mhm.
lo-fi. And then he made another song, and then I'm like, one day I'm sitting on the couch, I'm like, I should help him put this onto a CD, or we'll do a lathe cut, and he could have an album, and this could be interesting. Send him on his way with me. And he's like, "Oh, Dad, that was a few weeks ago. I don't even know where those things are now." And it was just like, I'm like, "Oh my God, he made an album and he didn't even remember where it was." And I'm like, "Okay, I was going to have him go on tour with Pig Face, and who was doing the merchandise, and it was just didn't mean that to him."
Yeah.
And so things are changing. That's for sure.
But so, I mean, it must have meant something at the moment. It was, it had that short lifespan, but it had a lifespan.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed listening to it, but it was also triumphant because, like, one morning he was up really early working on stuff and everything crashed and he lost a song. And I was waiting for the, tears or fuck this, I need a new laptop or something. And it's like, so anyway, I put it back together and crashed again. Anyway, here's the third version. I think it's better. I made some changes and I was like, oh, this is great,
Yeah. I mean, well, that's kind of the creative process, right? Yeah. So, so music, like everybody kind of, says it's everything, it's their life. But of course, I'm talking to DJs and musicians. So, this is obviously really important, but a lot of people have talked about how important it's been during the pandemic, because it's still a way for people to connect, and especially on Twitch. People are finding, like-minded souls and being able to comfort each other, help each other, connect, be social as much as they can over, a common interest in music, or even not even necessarily liking the same music, but just discovering even new music.
So I had exactly that experience, but with stories instead of music. So we did, I do a thing called the Midwest Music Expo. It's a conference that I started with students down at Millikan, and in conjunction with 2112 and a bunch of different places. And we switched to, we canceled an in-person event a month before lockdown because we could see where it was going.
Right.
And it was agonizing to sit with students. I remember sitting in this coffee shop and I'm like, the better this goes, the worse it's going to be for us. The more people travel, this is like that it's not triumphant. And we can't sit here hoping for nobody to show up. That goes against the grain of any kind of marketing, So we canceled them. Within a few days, I called everybody and said, let's try and do this new digital thing online through a platform called Zoom. And we tripled the registrations. And we had Lol Tolhurst gave us an hour from California, drummer from The Cure. Randy Blythe talked about sobriety for an hour. Galen Lee, Michael Anthony Alago, who signed Metallica when he was 23, 24. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. The caliber of this event was meteoric compared to what it was going to be.
Right.
And we didn't have this interaction, but we were getting emails. Students were emailing me saying, I've just got an email. I think it's in Dutch, and really excited, And so immediately I remember saying to Molly, my assistant, I'm like, well, there goes my fucking summer, because it was one of the last things that we did. And so many people got involved, and we had this one experience where we were screening the documentary about Michael Alago called Who the Fuck Is This, That Guy or This Guy? And our first screening on Zoom, there was like an 8 to 10 minute kung fu movie disconnect between the dialogue and people's voices.
Yeah.
And Drew Stone, the filmmaker, his father won an Oscar for a documentary film. He was online watching the documentary for the first time. I mean, there was some heavyweights on the call. and it was so bad that I was just like, I'm going to give it like one more minute because someone's going to say, Martin, can I just interrupt? We've got to stop this debacle. It's ridiculous. And I'm just waiting, and I look over at the chat, and there's hundreds of people just typing away. Nobody freaking cared. So our infatuation, our insecurities around technology and all that stuff, it's like, well, actually, that wasn't what was important. And so we started to do 1, 2, 3 events a week for 18 months. I did like 90 events, and had that connection. Had people just, dialing in on a Monday for my free touring class.
Yeah.
Somebody from New Zealand, El Salvador, Italy, Spain, England.
I tuned in for a few of those.
Just get this connection. It's like, wow, and it was this other thing, But so I think all kinds of people had similar connected experiences throughout the pandemic, for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things you mentioned, just how people didn't really care so much about the sound and video being matched up, and that kind of brings me to something I heard you talk about many times. It's just sort of the just do it kind of attitude, right? Just get it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make it happen, and learn from it, which is very entrepreneurial, but also very. I would think you would use the term punk rock as well.
Well, and so that's when, we're starting to look at process and I think that my time with PIL, where sometimes people left the stage, sometimes there were drugs involved, there were all kinds of different situations where shows didn't go as anybody thought they might, which included walking off the stage or riot police on horseback, helicopters, German shepherds with riot police on stage in Japan, just nothing to do with what you would think. And and we weren't rehearsed. I think that enabled, and then dealing with Killing Joke or Ministry, that enabled the attitude that allowed Pigface to just look, we could have a catastrophic Pigface performance. There've actually been a couple, but that's not going to be the end of my career,
right?
And so I think all of that leads directly into being able to take risks with a class. Or with a business or anything like that. It's DIY, but it's like, one of the things that I like to do is like, what are all of our advantages and what can we do with them? And one of my advantages is, my musical career could have ended in 92 and it would still be pretty decent, in fact, some might argue they wish it had, but so that it's like, well, what does that give you? Some people, it might give a refusal to allow anything but perfection, and somebody played a G instead of going up to the F, or the crazy taskmaster perfectionist stuff. And for me, the thing to perfect is the welcoming nature of the band, the social interaction with fans, and we're still learning and surprising ourselves at how to do that. One example being Pigface in 2016 a little bit, but 2019 especially, we opened up rehearsals for people and allowed people to come to rehearsal. So, I mean, you just completely, the whole idea of rehearsing so you can get away, present the perfect performance live.
Right.
Well, okay, but when you invite people to, didn't invite people to the fourth rehearsal, we invited people to the first one. And it's like, oh, oh, what have I done now? And because but what happened, like 50 people come walking in,
Mhm.
and I think I said something. We were like, you can't invite people into our house, our rehearsal space, without some PBR in the fridge and some water. What if people don't want to drink some
Mhm.
water? Then I call up Pie-Eyed Pizzeria. They send over some pizzas, and so everybody's just like, I think the audience, the fans were kind of like freaked out. Like, well, how do we stand? What are we
Right,
supposed
right,
to
right.
do? We applaud? Because there's no guidebook for attending rehearsals.
Yeah.
And but what happened was, um, in our attempt to, uh, in what I thought was disassembling rehearsals and disrupting them to create a fan connection, I actually created better rehearsals, because there are members of Pigface who will just be like, okay, here we go with this really emotional song. Charles, could you finish that sandwich? We're doing it, the song again. Where
Yeah.
is he? Or somebody else is on the phone, and but suddenly everybody in the band, mohawks were at full
Yeah. Yeah.
salute, and I'm like, oh, this is actually a really good idea for
Yeah.
the best rehearsal ever. And I knew that, if I'm practicing drums on my own, sometimes I'll just drop my sticks because I've forgotten that I'm drumming and I'm thinking of something else.
Yeah.
If there's two people in a room, you could set fire to my hands and saw 2 or 3 fingers off, and I wouldn't drop my sticks. So I knew the focus and attention that people bring.
Yeah.
But we're always doing that. We're always relearning and
Well,
learning.
what's interesting about that is that each of those will be a unique experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's something I think been hearing a lot about, for years, is, this emphasis on experience. And if each time you're there playing something, it's unique, that becomes, more valuable, both to the band, I think, and the audience.
Yeah.
Like the days of trading, was it the what do you call it?
Bootlegs.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean, so, and just to step away from music again, so Leslie Rankine, I worked on her album. She's on Fook and Notes from the Underground with Pigface, and I tracked the vocals on Chickasaw with her, and then she went off and did an album with Mark Walk, and then did Ruby, did her thing, and so she came out in 2016, and there's a few people in the rehearsal space, and sang Chickasaw with us, and we were crying, because it's such an emotive song and so amazing for her voice, and she said, I've waited 26 years to sing that song with everybody.
Hmm.
And we're like, fuck, I've waited that long for this too, and then in 2019, people ask, like, what was your strategy behind bringing Randy Blythe from Lamb of God? I'm like, well, my strategy was Mary Biker forgot that he was committed to a festival in the UK with Pop Will Eat Itself or Gay Bikers or both. And so he could do the first gig, but then not the next 3 or not the next, I don't know. And so Greta Brinkman, one of the 3 bass players on the last tour, she said, well, I know this guy from Richmond. And she didn't say he's in a really famous band. So I know this guy from Richmond. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, does he, is he a fan? She's like, yes, he has his own radio show and he plays Pigface a lot. I'm like, okay, all right then. And that's it, really. That's
yeah,
then it's like then it's like whatever this guy Randy brought to the table, we deal with it,
Mhm.
and if it, and so he really wanted to sing Tapeworm, which was one of Olga's songs, and I'm sure, I don't care what anybody's done. I've done a lot. I still get nervous, I'm sure he was nervous walking into the rehearsal
Mhm.
space with everybody: Charles, Mary, Curse, me, Leslie, Greta, um, God, Bradley, 15 people.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, okay, well, Tapeworm, da, da, da. And oh my God, they say he owned that song.
Mhm.
And it's like you discover the meanings of these phrases that people overuse, Um, he absolutely owned that song. And another phrase we learned, we were gobsmacked. People are just like, what?
yeah,
And for so then to be in the audience watching not just a pig face rehearsal, but the first time I met Randy, hey Randy, how's it going? You want to take one? Okay, 2, 3, 4, but right, to watch these interactions in their purest form before they are like, show number 10.
Mhm.
Of course, things change and whatever, but these pure, raw exchanges, it's pretty wild.
yeah,
It's pretty wild. And I mean, I'm looking at, the energy is bouncing I'm just looking at people who are watching us, just
yeah,
like, what the fuck,
yeah, yeah,
and everything just is amplified by removing barriers, and then and
yeah.
5, 10, but I'm sure 10 minutes after that happened, people were talking about it,
Mhm.
but creating moments is, to me, that's my new jam.
Yeah,
I mean, hopefully it's been my jam, but when I speak, I'm conscious of trying to be entertaining in the moment, but but deliver some thought-provoking pieces in a way that somebody would remember,
yeah,
so and so it's the same construct. It's the same. Well, I don't say, now here comes a really interesting
right,
thing.
right.
If you want to get out your pens, I might say that if I was just going to say, fuck it up, write this down, FUCK, whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, in the same way that I might say, before we start, could I have you all turn to the person to your left? And people are just like, people will do it, but they're thinking, this guy's an asshole. And I'm like, and punch them in the nuts, or whatever, you know, um, punch them right in the face, like, um, uh, so I'm always trying to do that.
yeah,
And when it happens and surprises me, it's a really
yeah.
special.
Well, I think it reminds me of just in and transitioning a little bit to the teaching, aspect is, helping people realize it's okay to make mistakes, to fail, to try, right? I always say the only failure is not learning, right? And the only way something works is to try it.
Right. But you also, and I'll tell you about some of the things I've done with students, but
Mhm.
but I'm not an idiot, right? So I would, even if I thought I'd made the best cake in the world,
Mhm.
I don't think I would ever say, hey, internet, get ready for the best fucking cake in the world. I can't believe I've done it. I've seen some cakes and they were good, but this is better, right? I would always, it's Shakespearean. I forget which play it's from, where somebody has to speak to the Senate, and they, it's also politics now.
Mhm.
You lower expectations, and and so I think in Shakespeare they said, "Look, I'm not much of a speaker. However, they went on to, they lowered everybody's expectations to
Right.
the point like, well, actually, no, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah.
Much better than I thought. And so anytime I'm doing anything that might be risky, I'm conscious that whilst the adrenaline, fear, and insecurity of a student that's about to shit the bed can create learning opportunities and open pathways in the brain.
Mhm.
You don't want to have something be so catastrophic that it's unforgettable.
Right, right.
So then I'll be like, I'll try and be like, I never liked this place anyway. So I don't imagine very many people are going to come out tonight. However, it's your job to fill the venue, and if you don't, you'll be graded accordingly. So we've had students put on a show, several shows actually, at Reggie's Rock Club in Chicago with 22, 23 different artists. And that's its own. It's like, great, you've solved the problem of filling the room because you hope that each artist brings 10 people. They'll all promise to bring 50 people, but they might bring 10. But you've also solved that problem because 5 artists can bring nobody, because some artists will bring 50 people, so the room's full. But now you've got to deal with 22. What time am I going on? Is there you said there'd be beer? I'm hungry. Is there a rider? And so you're just trading. For me, it's easier to deal with artists and problems and production than it is to deal with an empty room, So we did that. We put DJs on the Brown line, the L train in Chicago.
Yeah.
That was spectacular. Created some opportunities for students. We put artists on the double-decker bus, which I thought it was the poor relation to the DJs on the train, but actually driving around and people in their offices are dancing with the DJ. I mean, it was really cool. And we got to stop. We went to 3 different locations: Threadless Shirts, a clothing store. People met us at the clothing store. There was a performance there. We went to an art center with a separate sound system, and there were 3 performers there with pizza and pop. We've done some stuff and learned to allow the students to completely lose their minds, freak out on each other, apologize, give up, cry in the car park, just like, this is it. I mean, I never wanted to, and then all come together triumphantly at the end, like, holy shit, we just did it.
Yeah.
So one of the great things about the music business, or teaching in the music business, is that every day on the road, you have to make something happen. And there are no safety nets except your own ingenuity and your hustle and your creativity. And so if there aren't people at the venue, we're not getting paid. If there aren't people at the venue, I don't care what's on the rider. Sushi, we're getting sushi in Boston with the champagne, vodka. Yeah, no, you're not. We haven't sold any tickets. We were going to get you pizza, but you still haven't sold any tickets, and you've been assholes. There's no pizza. You're not getting paid. If no one's at the show, how can any of the people that don't exist buy a T-shirt? So you just learn, whoever's fault it is, whatever the problems are within yourself. Oh, my cat just disappeared. I've got diarrhea. You better make something work, because nobody cares. And you take that learning curve, that attitude, and you plug it into anything, and you will succeed. Especially any kind of entrepreneurial business setting. And that's kind of what I've done, is to let students run a label, do some different things with community organizations and entities, that we work with, suicide awareness and prevention and homelessness, and not just say, we've got a label, isn't this music cool? Well, what if the students, there's tons of music that I don't like, just trying to give people reasons to invest and engage. And if you can't get behind some local bands doing making an album for suicide awareness, I don't know. Then I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, what I was getting at was that, like, I make it so that the student's grade isn't dependent on the success of anything, but on how much effort they put in, right? So it could be a complete flop, but the important thing is, what do they learn from that, right? What are they going to, so it's really important for them to reflect. Okay, this is what went wrong. This is what I learned. This is what I can do next time. And that, to me, is a great learning experience. That's an A, right? Compared to, all right, maybe you just got lucky and happened to book the right, band that, attracted a lot of people, right? It's because that's how it is in entrepreneurship, right?
Right.
You're going to bet on the people that have failed before, much more than you're going to bet often on the ones that have succeeded, because they could have just succeeded by luck.
Right. However, I have told my students, your grade is going to be the attendance.
Right.
And if the venue is 100% full, and so I'm working with some other factors.
Mhm.
One is buy-in and engagement. Sometimes there's a student in the class who's like, yeah, fuck this. I see what you're doing. You're letting us book 10 rappers and a piano player and somebody on saxophone, and we're supposed to be like, ooh, well, fuck you. There's some people who just don't buy into education, and so so it's fantastic when another student loses it and spends time out of class explaining to another, like, we need your help. We've lost track of time, which is a really great signifier for me. Like, class, if class finishes at 5:30 and at 5:15 people are like starting to pack up, I'm like, oh god.
Yeah.
One of the first classes we did this, I was teaching at SAE in Chicago. I'm teaching at Millikan now, but we looked up, it was 20:09 at night. We went 4 hours over.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
So I build in a few things to make this work a little bit. We would invite the first, second, and third semester students to the fourth semester project. So they were just like, wow. And of course, when it's a first semester student, you get credit. You can't just say you should really come and support your fellow students. They're just like, yeah, but so they come because it was like a class credit, whatever, and be
requirement.
Like, oh,
yeah.
Shit. And then I'd hear them like, we'll do, fuck these guys. We'll do this so much better because we're going to have this. I'm like, yeah, you talk. But when it comes down to it, you'll shit your pants and you never know, and then, so they start to be invested in talking about stuff. And then you mentioned reflection, and at the beginning of class, I would read, I'd let them read, and we would all read reflections from the previous class, and so that's a great assignment for the people. And another way I could grade, even if it was a catastrophe, I'm like, okay, now what I need you to do, not for a grade and fuck school and nobody cares, whatever, but for the next class, what would you say to them to avoid the situation that you just went through? So it becomes more meaningful. They're trying to help themselves 3 months previously, and so we've got all of these educational experiences built in, and I think the other thing that we did, it's all theater, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, here's a note from the last class, like, good luck, you'll scream, you'll cry, whatever. Here's $100. We did really well with that project. Here's $100. you must. We always wanted to order Chinese food. So, but whatever you want to order some food. And I'm like, wow. And they're like, oh, hold on a second. The only proviso is you've got to order it within 30 minutes. And like, oh, okay. Who can't do that? And then I'd leave them to it. And it was like a microcosm of the coming 3 months. People are like, well, hey, let's do a little bit of research. Who feels like that? Well, I'm allergic to, okay, well, never mind. Okay. You know what? Let's do, and you come in and I just say something like, oh, hey, you got like, I don't know why they set a time limit, 10 minutes to go. And they're like, what? And people are freaking out. Someone's screaming because they're hungry,
Yeah.
Somebody else is like, oh my God, and a couple of times they didn't manage to order any food. And I just go, well, there you go.
Mhm.
You were talking the talk, you're going to do this and that.
Yep.
You weren't able to order, and then I'd let them order food, but you weren't able to order food. What makes you think you can coordinate? And it was just like, oh shit,
Yeah.
So
that reminds me of the marshmallow test. Have you seen that, where you build out of spaghetti and all that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but and that's good, but that's a constructed thing.
Right.
It's when they don't think it's a thing,
Right.
that you can really see some stuff.
Yeah. It has more direct consequences. Like, when you're thinking you're going to get some food, and oh wait.
Right. And then I think for me, an element of this is risk, right? I remember down at Milliken, the first Midwest Music Expo we did, I'm like, here we go. You can get anything. You just have to ask. And they were just like, what the hell is he talking about? And it works for me in Chicago, but Decatur is 2.5 hours south of here. And it's a different environment. And I called up Travel Lodge. I'm like, hey, it's Martin at Milliken, and we're doing a conference. We're going to have people coming down up from Nashville, down from Chicago. We just wanted to, we're looking for a room rate. They're like, yeah, no, we don't have who is this? What's happening? And I was just, and this was live in front of the class. And I'm like, oh God, And so I called another hotel, the Decatur Conference Center Hotel. And I'm like, oh God, please, And hey, Trina, would you grab that, please? Sorry, that a dog has got a squeaky toy. And so I called the Decatur Conference Center Hotel, and the woman in marketing is like, well, and I'm in front of the class, and some of the class are like, yeah, this guy's an idiot. What does he think? And she says on speaker, well, we could give you 10 rooms for that night, but we can't do any more than 10 free rooms with a breakfast. And I'm like, holy. And so we, just like Randy singing Tapeworm, we all experience that, like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I think that, so I don't know what there is other than real anymore, especially after this last 18 months, the real consequences.
Yeah. So that's an example of just, the ask, what can somebody say is no. Right.
Right.
I was talking, I had an interview with Boot Blacks last night, and we were talking Star Wars. And I said, because they're all big fans of Star Wars, I'm like, call up Disney and see if you can do something. Like, what are they going to do? They're either going to say yes or no.
You would be surprised.
It's no loss.
You get better at finding a way in. One of the pieces at the museum is a jacket from a club in Chicago called the Exit.
Right.
And their jackets have gone through several iterations, but back in the day, they were real cop jackets.
Yeah.
With real huge Exit, I don't know what you call those, Letterman jacket decals on the back. And I called up Joe at Exit. I'd been there. We filmed, had like a hole there and some other stuff. And I'm like, it's Martin Atkins. I'm going to Poland with Killing Joke. Give me a jacket and I'll wear it in Poland and in on Melody Maker. Who knows? I can't guarantee. I mean, I wore it in so many pictures with my back to the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe's like, "I'm giving you a jacket." So, but he said, I'll meet you at Nate's Leathers, which is where we get the leathers from. I'll hook you up with my rate and I'll give you the decal for the back and I'll pay to have them apply the decal. I'm like, yeah, well, all right, And I mean, sometimes you have to just kind of say outrageous stuff and and ask. And I had a few conversations with when you need help and you ask for help, you think you're asking for help, but you're not. Well, I mean, you are, yeah, you are, but you're giving somebody who's in a position to help, who wants to help, the opportunity to help. And that's a gift. I mean, so many people have said about the museum, thank you so much for doing this, and so there are different ways. There are these kind of moments where people who haven't done some of the crazy things that myself and my associates have done, they've chosen, they might have thought about doing that, but for one reason or another, they've chosen a different life that has enabled them to be perhaps more comfortable and enabled them to be able to help something. It's a gift so it's like, look, here, with the case of the museum, here's 45 years of my life in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And now these people who helped are now involved, like yourself, you're now involved with that, in a really direct, meaningful way. And so there are just different ways of looking at all of these asks and these gives, So it seems like I'm asking for help, but I'm giving opportunity, and it seems like people are giving me help, but they're, so it's a really interesting time where experiences and feelings and stories are the new currency. They really,
Well, I mean, first, that's a really interesting way to put it. You're not asking for help; you're giving somebody a chance to offer help, which is a great way to think about it. But yeah, experiences has been just a growing thing for years. I remember back when I was at UIC as a grad student and, filling in for a professor who was off on tour giving talks. I used this, this was early 2000s. So this was early in the days of Starbucks, but it was a video about what Starbucks was all about. And what they said was what they were selling was not coffee, but the experience.
Right.
That's how they could charge so much money, because it wasn't the coffee that you were buying the coffee house experience.
Right. That's delivering happiness. The guy's selling shoes.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're not selling shoes. We're selling customer service and the knowledge that you're going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And people get really people's tolerance of lack of respect has if someone doesn't get an email back about their order quickly, people are understanding of us because we get swamped quickly, but people have a really low tolerance for a lack of respect. And if you give respect and you care about people and you personalize things and add to things, it's really easy to delight people. So, there are people who are waiting for a museum founder's shirt who don't know they're going to have a personalized letter and a pass. And I think an 80-page magazine is coming down the pike. We just don't mention that stuff. It's like, if you send people more than they thought they were going to get, it's a really easy way of just delighting people.
Yeah.
And so, and once you see that, to me, it's impossible to think of not trying to delight somebody.
Yeah, and my wife's been doing it. She has a jewelry business. She sells stuff over Etsy. And after years of exploring, she's finally found her niche of accepting the fact that she's a goth and wants to sell stuff to goths. So she's selling spiders and bats and all that kind of stuff. But she started putting a unique twist on things, and she had gone to an estate sale and picked up boxes and boxes of old sheet music, from the 20s, 30s, 40s. And she would wrap every piece in a piece of sheet music. Nothing to do with what they were ordering. But people would get it, and it's like, this is so cool. Mm-hmm. And so they would post that, and they, in their reviews, like, look at this. So last month she was down in Texas looking after her dad, who just got diagnosed with dementia. And so I was handling, here I was trying to make the jewelry for her. But I knew that was an important thing, was having that personalization. So I started looking for, what can I do? I'm like, I'm not very good with my hands with things, but I looked around the office, and she's like, okay, there's a bunch of stamps here. So I can start, stamping things, that are relative, and so, which is like, kind of like, some of the stuff that you're doing.
Well, and it was really great. I was in Japan a couple of years ago with dark matter coffee, and I've always loved rubber stamps. I used to have a PIL one, a Brian Brain one, a Killinger, all these stamps, and I use them all with my signature, put them on envelopes, as I'm doing now, and checking out of this really nice hotel, and they're just really carefully rubber stamping all of the invoices, and and it's a cultural thing there, and as much as it's time consuming, it just doesn't matter. People always say, yeah, don't forget, when you're factoring in your cost of goods, your time. It's like, yeah, fuck off. It's just, I'm up all night then, aren't I? If I'm lucky enough to have a few hundred people help found this museum, then how can you begrudge spending the time? Like, oh, now I'm going to need a new ink pad. I'm rubber stamping these things. I'm getting carpal tunnel. I mean, old school typewriters are exhausting, and but great, there, I think, what is it? There are no economics of scale. That relationships don't scale. They're just cumbersome, and hopefully the time that you need is underwritten by some of the activities that you've put in place.
Yeah. So the idea, is what the value, right? It's not so much looking at the value of your time and incorporating that into the price of something. It's, what is the price that you can charge? What is it worth? And is it worth your time? Right. Rather than you looking at it the other way around. Right.
Well, and you could, it would be easy to say, why does everybody have a number? Founders of the museum have a number. Well, now it's already created this little subculture thing. Like, hey, who's in the room tonight? 10, 17. Holy shit, 4. Okay. It's become a thing, and
like with the email I sent to you, I wrote number 16 in it.
I sent it occurred to me too late, because I like somebody's 242, right? And with cold waves coming up, I actually emailed that person. I said, hey, are you a front 242 fan? I just randomly, because we could auction that. 242 are playing at cold waves. We could auction that for Darkest Before Dawn. It would be kind of a fun thing. And they haven't responded. I think they were just like outraged that I would ask for a number back. But I'm definitely putting 666 aside, 420, all of that stuff. But, and I was thinking, there's so many releases on Invisible. 091 was the Ritalin album with Ogre. I was thinking like, oh, I should have your 091 and here's the corresponding album. It's just like, all right, Martin, just calm down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I didn't even think about the number until I saw, your email talking about how, and I'm like, I mean, I didn't know what my number was until I looked at it. It's like, oh, wow. I guess I was pretty quick on.
But entrepreneurially,
yeah,
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'm surrounded with some, of course, as a museum, it's some very traditional business people,
Mhm.
and attorneys and all the rest of that stuff. And it's very definitely, the attitude was, take a couple of years and we'll do the 501c3, maybe 8 months, and then and then you can do this and you can do that.
Right.
Bump. And we have like 4,000 square feet at the building, and it's a really nice high ceiling basement. The studio's down there. Just make sure you scan everything. And I'm like, no, I'm taking back the ground floor. It's 2,000 square feet. I'm going to hang everything I have and start to have meetings about the museum in the museum. And I think I just announced one day, I'm starting a museum. Here's the founder's shirt. You can get that. And it didn't include a letter or a pass. It just evolved because people didn't want, the idea was wear the shirt, we'll let you in.
Right.
And and I always thought people would like bring a piece of, like, I don't know that we were going to police that, but so then people were like, we don't want to wear the shirt. Could you do some kind of a note? I'm like, oh.
Right.
So I had to do a note with rubber stamps and whatever, personalize that. And then a week later, people like, I saw what you're doing with the letter. It looks beautiful. We're actually going to frame it. Could you do a pass? And I wanted to say, for fuck's sake, what do you want? You want next? A fucking cake with your name on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's funny. So now people, now people are getting this package of stuff. And,
but see, you only know all this because you started doing it.
Yeah.
Right. If you tried to plan all this, you would have never planned all of that.
Right. But so the doing is also the litmus test. I don't know what the entrepreneurial business phrase is for it. Yeah. Proof of concept.
It's an experiment with an MVP.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm like, well, if nobody cares, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. But if people care, well, okay,
Yeah.
But then built in, if there's a sufficient number of people care, then we'll do something physical and permanent. And we got there very quickly. And the response from other people, attorneys, architects, grant writers, just people, has been insane. And there's been I think we began by talking about the reverence with which I treat some music, and the very how careful I am that I don't know what a situation, a tour, a band, a gig, a recording is going to precipitate from somebody, what stories will come. So I'm fairly careful, and I think people sense that, so people started sending things in, and somebody sent one of Ogre's stage suits from 2015 from Skinny Puppy Tour. So and so now I'm sending them photographs of Bobby Talamine, who's a huge rock and roll photographer of repute, taking pictures of Ogre's suit on a mannequin in front of the Fuke backdrop from 1992 made by Tim Gore that Ogre definitely sang in front of. And so then I'm sending them pictures of their baby, in front of my babies in a very respectful way. And getting these emails back of like, wow, this was just in my closet, and now it's out there, and I'll come and visit it one day, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
But the knowledge that even though it's really weird, it's kind of like true love, right? Even though you're no longer together selfishly, this piece is bringing joy. It's where it should be,
yeah,
right? It's being surrounded by similar objects from a few decades, and the reverberance is extrapolating, and it just works.
yeah,
So we're still, it's great to be surprised and amazed by all of this different
yeah.
stuff that,
It- it-
and we can do the business stuff,
yeah.
yeah.
At some point, you're going to run out of space.
Oh, that's happening very, very soon.
Yeah,
There are some things that's like, do we need to, does anybody care about that? And then I pulled out 5 hand screened posters that are so different from each other. It seems insane. It's the same conversation we're having. The
yeah,
scale, right? Doesn't scale. But you put 5 of them together and it really makes a statement.
mhm,
And so then that needed a wall. And then we found some backdrop pieces. It's the pieces from that I did for Sheep on Drugs. And then we found the Sheep on Drugs neon. And then next thing you know, there's a themed area.
mhm.
And then we find all these damage manual pieces. And somebody sends something else, and more PIL stuff surfaces. So what thought was a really good amount of space for PIL is completely inadequate. More suits, and not just suits, but kind of meaningful, what you call them meaningful pieces. A
Mhm.
suit made by Sandy Powell, who's now an Oscar-winning costume designer, or Amanda Uprichard, who has her own collection through Macy's, some large collection in New York.
Yeah,
Or Brenda Siegelman, who sang backups on Rock the Casbah with the Clash, a shirt that she made. So that suddenly there's mannequins all over the place, and you just go with it and hope that the momentum creates an opportunity to be in a larger space.
yeah,
So you kind of, the perfect scenario is for a developer or an architect to come walking in the space and go, well, you need more space, and we're here to help,
yeah,
and of course, you hope that you create something meaningful enough that their offer to help is slightly selfish on their part, because they want to be helped by the
Mhm.
momentum that we're creating, and
Right.
the culture that we're putting in an aquarium almost to look at. It's really interesting, but
Yeah,
it's a completely it's a way of doing business that I'm totally comfortable with, that I have realized in the last 3 months that it's the exact opposite of how most people would go about this.
yeah.
That
Well,
feels good too.
yeah. Well, I mean, I've always said that entrepreneurship does not belong in a business school because it's like anti-business. I basically, when I have my students come to class, I tell them I'm going to teach you all stuff that is counter to everything you're learning in business school, and business students are the worst entrepreneurs there are, which they don't like, but
Well, and I had this discussion with a really smart person, and we did a pop-up 2 weeks ago, and there's 25 people in the space. You can hold 60 quite comfortably, and this person is like, you've got to stop doing this. What if a really drunk person, like, we have this really amazing raincoat that somebody painted a PIL logo on in 1980, and it's a really interesting story. It's in my diary. There's a photograph of note from a noted photographer from the period, right? And you don't have any one of those pieces. It's still interesting, but it's not, and you can't have people come into the space. And I'm like, well, okay, but if somebody was really, really drunk, before they're really, really drunk, they're really drunk. and before they're really drunk, they're drunk. And I'm like, I could sense that stuff, you know. And to me, there's a risk of not doing anything. By
Yeah.
doing something, now I can tell the story, which is currency, of like, you know, we did this thing, and an artist flew out from Los Angeles for a 25-person pop-up event at the museum, and 2 people drove from Akron to be at the museum. And so now I can tell that to the city of Chicago, and they're like, "Ooh, you know, it's not me saying, and what if I do get to do my museum, I think people will like it. It's just evidence, evidence, evidence,
Mhm.
story, story, story." And
Yeah.
and that's that's a music business way of doing
Yeah.
it.
And I would think even if the piece got ruined, that's another story.
Yeah, it's not a story that I
It's
would
not a
like,
great
you
story,
know, but
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 it's something.
but
Right.
it's but it's a really interesting study in
Yeah.
traditional business versus punk rock DIY,
Yeah.
post-punk industrial mayhem. You
Hmm.
know, like there are uh, there are good points of both approaches, and I don't think my seat of the pants approach, um, whilst it's working entrepreneurially and from a marketing point of view, there's some museum stuff that is so rigid and guided by relational database handshaking stuff that for the next phases to work, for
Hmm.
research stuff to happen, they just simply have to be done in a certain way, you know.
Yeah.
But for the areas that are open to interpretation, we're interpreting the shit out of it.
So you see this as a like a traditional museum in the future, in terms of it being a source of research data, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just so anecdotally,
Hmm.
I've acquired one piece so far. Um, it's an album by the Duritty Column on Factory Records. It's called The Return of the Duritty Column, and it's their first album. Um, I forget the serial number on Factory Records, but the sleeve of the vinyl, the exterior is made of sandpaper.
Mm.
So as you put the album into your collection, it slowly destroys the album to the left and the album to the right. And
Right.
it's like, fucking hell, post-punk, fucking hell, this is it. And it's amazing until I tell you that Guy Debord used a sandpaper cover to his book called Memoir in 1959. And so, you know, that's the job of the museum to
Hmm.
like, you know,
Right.
uh, so there's a traditional educational role, and I want to teach out of there, but there's non-traditional stuff. So here's my drum kit from Head Like a Hole, Money Is Not Our God, In Case You Didn't Feel Like Showing Up, Pig Face, Damage Manual, blah blah blah. Go and have a go. I mean, I can't destroy my own drum. Danny Carey played those. I mean, have a go. You know, there's some pieces from Test Department, metal shelves,
Yeah.
um, surrounded by housed in ministry cage pieces,
Right.
um,
Right. The
and
the hubcaps.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
hubcap marimba, and there's
Yeah.
metal shelves as well that are
Yes.
concave from being beaten with
Yes.
axe handles.
Which I had some
Ooh. Oh, there you go.
from
Yeah,
from the last from Colways.
you're kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is 1997,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, yeah, you want to bang on, the shelves, go ahead. And then
I
we
do.
go
I do.
theme park. So like when somebody's behind the drum kit, is that an Instagram moment? Can they choose a manipulated photograph so they're in the Head Like a Hole video, or they're on stage next to Bill Rieflin for Breathe? You know, choose your background, take the picture. The moment the car goes over the hump on the Big Dipper at Disneyland, you know. So it's a little bit theme park, but but yeah, it needs to have that research component.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know what other levels of this that we are
Yeah.
negating.
Well, that brings me to a question that I wanted to ask. I've just recently been going on this like deep dive exploration of like pre-punk experimental industrial, and this got actually inspired by Test Department. So I did an event on May 1st, fundraising for Darkest Before Dawn, and I asked Test Department, it's May Day event, and said, hey, can you guys do something? Like, sure. They put together a 60-minute mix, but in that they included a couple of pieces from 1922, 1923 Soviet symphonies of like industrial horns and sirens. And so they're on YouTube, and it's really, it's actually really cool stuff. And then so that took me into like all this other really cool experimental stuff. And so I'm wondering if that would ever work its way into the museum, because it's not post-punk, it's way pre-punk.
Right. But it feels like it's industrial.
Yeah,
right? So the
absolutely
museum is
industrial.
the Museum of Post-Punk and Industrial. And
there you go.
And so, I would argue that post-punk started in 78. I mean, punk was brief.
Mm-hmm.
It was brief. But so 1981, I'm playing drums along to the sounds of the mechanism of a watch. I mean, that when you remove the fact that it was Public Image Limited, it's like, well, that's basically an industrial act to play drums to a mechanical instrument, as creating the loop and the time signature. And so music from the 20s, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's just, a couple of people have said, oh, okay, it's the Museum of Martin Atkins. No, it isn't. I'm old. I'm 60. I was 62 2 weeks ago, and I've done a lot. People might not know some of the work I did with Genesis Peorage or Swans or Test Department. We released Neubauten. I worked with Skinny Puppy on The Process and Ogre on his first album. I mean, there's a ton of shit.
Yeah.
It's come through the doors of Invisible, and so I'm just the starting point.
Right.
And a pretty. This
is a good foundation.
Yeah, I don't mean. I was going to say a pretty good starting point, because I'm also on the verge of being on television hoarder. So the level of stuff that I still have is ridiculous, and it's just like, well, holy shit, let's use this as this, like, this is already kind of, arguably decent and interesting, and let's use it to take this to the next level. So Paulie Gladden, who I'm sure will be at Coldways, he dropped off 28 t-shirts. Like,
really?
Here, archive these, motherfucker. And it's like, holy crap. So
Paulie's great. I love Paulie.
Oh my God. And but so then, so Paulie gets to have these things out of his closet. He can come and visit them. We'll have our own whiskey by the end of the week with 18th Street Distillery. So, like, toast to, you get to toast to your collection and visit it and hang out. And Ned Wall sent me one of the very first Fuck Art, Let's Kill shirts from CamLab. There was 100 made initially, and he had one of the first ones.
Yeah.
So just stuff that's nothing to do with me, that's just been enabled by the fact that this thing exists.
And I've been thinking about what I have, which isn't a whole lot, but it just dawned on me, because when I met Paulie, it was at Neo, and I was wearing an old Revco shirt. And so he comes up and goes, look at my, because he had Revco on there. And just, it dawned on me that I'm one of the very few people that have that shirt because that was from the 1989 Medusa's New Year's Eve party, and it says it on the back.
Wow.
And I met another guy that at the one in 2016 where the Cox played, and another guy had a similar shirt, but it was a different version.
Huh.
But I have not been able anywhere on the internet to find this shirt.
Wow.
So maybe
Wow.
I will, because I can't really wear it without something underneath. It is so faded, but it's still, unique. That so maybe I will at least loan it at some point
Right.
when I
So
come in.
that's the other thing that we're learning about museum business is some people want to give us stuff and just be done with them. Some people want to long-term loan things,
Mhm.
and there's all kinds of agreements for that. Because so if you wanted to lend us a shirt, right, you can't lend us a shirt informally, right? Because it might be part of an exhibit. You
Right.
can't be like, yeah, Martin, you know that shirt? Yes, the exhibit's going with. No, I need it back. Like, oh no, we got it.
Oh yeah.
It's been featured yeah. So we're learning all about, I guess, in terms of student experiences,
Yeah.
um, museum archiving, uh, the marketing stuff. We're doing a hair pop-up around Cold Waves where
Yeah.
people can come in and get their hair done. That's Gil and Arandi. They did Pigface in 2016 and 2019, just backstage, like blowing everybody out,
Yeah. Yeah.
dyeing people's hairs, just making everybody feel good. And I'm like, you should come and do it in the middle of the main floor of the museum. So we're going to do some different things to
Yeah.
have fun and expose people and be punk and industrial.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't wait to see it. So like I said, I'm hoping I get a chance when I'm up there for Cold Waves. If not,
Of course.
then there'll
Of course.
be, I'll definitely be making future trips. So we normally go to Chicago 3 times a year. But obviously haven't been able to go for a while. But
So is there a Thursday night pre-event, or was it, is it Thursday,
yeah,
Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is
And
anything happening
Thursday, we'll be going up there Thursday for sure, because that's my birthday.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
And I'm 10 years behind you, so I'm turning 52.
Wow. Wow. So maybe we'll do something. I don't want to tread on anything that they
Right.
have going on.
Yeah.
But I would suspect their Thursday thing will be kind of a later thing. Maybe we'll do a Thursday afternoon,
Yeah.
early evening thing.
Well, I haven't booked my flight yet, so I'll make sure I book an earlier flight in case there is
There you
something.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll do something on the Wednesday as well.
Yeah.
But I would think definitely Thursday afternoon, um, and uh, maybe Saturday during the day. Because what time does it start on the Saturday? Like 5?
I think like 6 or 7. Like
Yeah.
doors open 6 or 7, something like that.
So maybe
Yeah.
maybe we'll do like
Yeah.
a noon till 4
Yeah.
thing on the Saturday. There's some people just, hopefully people aren't too hungover, and they can come down and see some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that would be cool. God, I'm just looking at my list of things I had to ask about. We kind of covered a lot.
Okay.
But one of the things, and I know you're probably have other things you got to get done, but one of the things I wanted to ask though is what your thoughts are in terms of like the future for the music business, as because we're definitely going through a change right now, I would think.
Yeah, but we always have.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of being old
Hmm.
and starting so young. So when I came up, there wasn't internet, there weren't fax
Right.
machines,
Hmm.
there weren't VCRs. Maybe no, there were
Yeah.
VCRs, maybe, right? Because
Early 80s, I know there were definitely VCRs. Yeah.
okay, so there were cassette. So I remember when cassette tapes were the devil. you know, because they're blank, people can record music instead of buying it. This is the end of the music, but no, it isn't. So that certainly colored my perception of downloading, you know, streaming. I'm like, yeah, people can just listen for nothing, but they've always been able to do that. And that's how you get fans. And the problem has always been finding the people who like your music and creating experiences from them that they can't get from
Right.
MP3,
Can't download
MP3.
because we're not in the matrix.
Right. So, and then vinyl was, well, for a while it was cassette, vinyl, and CDs. So for a small business, Invisible Records, we probably did Murder Inc. Yes, yeah, we did Murder Inc. And Gub was on cassette, vinyl, and I mean, it was impossible to make money in a niche business. Like maybe we sold a ton of vinyl, but we had CDs sitting around. Oh, we were behind the cassette doom, you know, and then streaming, and then downloading, and then streaming, which really fucked up downloading. And now here we are, vinyl, art, NFTs, fucking, you know. So my career has been drummer, manager, label owner, producer, studio owner, teacher, author, curriculum developer, public speaker,
Museum director,
museum, whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't expect that level of disruption in your life, then and you cling on to one of those things, you'll be there, you know, as almost happened with vinyl pressing. There was like 2 pressing plants left 5 6 years ago, and now it's like, yeah, we're back, motherfuckers, you know. But you'll be clinging on to that and coming up with reasons why things aren't the way they used to be or whatever. But I mean, to me, so many businesses, from a purely business point of view, so many businesses just change their model. So CD Baby, disc makers, they'll make objects for you, but they also have a business helping you upload your music to these places. And you know, if there are 70,000 songs being uploaded every day, then clearly that's the business to be in. It's like the choice between, do I want to sell Ringo Starr handmade drumsticks, or do I just want to give everybody, whether they use them or not, they're playing in their basement, or they give them to somebody who never uses them, sticks for everybody? Well, clearly sticks for everybody is a wider market, you know, and people are making that choice. Weirdly, by taking a step back from my label, I'm taking a step back into it. I just discovered Murder Inc. demos, 4-track Murder Inc. demos, Pigface interviews conducted by Jason Pettigrew. So much archive material.
Yeah.
So I might say, fuck labels, museums, and then through the museum, rework my label. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's always been, you know, fuck labels. It's all about management companies. And we've signed to this management company who have their own label. Okay, well, we used to, you know, it's just, things have always been changing.
Yeah.
They seem to be changing more quickly now in a more fractured, scattered way because of the internet. But you can find people because of the internet.
Right. But I mean, the question is like, I mean, it's always been tough for an artist to make a living, right? But here with another, you know, punctuated equilibrium, you know, there's a chance for a change that maybe this time, you know, artists can actually start making something. And what I suggested, and this just kind of popped in my head last night talking to Bootblacks, was in the future, whenever sign a deal for a show, get the streaming rights, right? Because I think that's it's going to be an income stream. The question is who gets the income.
Well, but then also if you so this happened to us, we recorded all of the Pigface shows in 2019,
Mhm.
but with some venues who are also struggling to diversify their income stream, recording and film rights in a venue are a revenue stream for the venue.
Right. Yeah.
Whether you make money or not, House of Blues want $10,000 to record your show there.
Mhm.
So yeah, and as soon as one thing surfaces, something else takes its place. I saw a post the other day. I'm looking for new revenue streams. I'm thinking about selling beats. Fucking good luck. I mean, that was an interesting market 10 years ago. I did Beat Fetish Sound Library for Cakewalk 15 years ago. I mean, there are, I think it's a part of whatever the future holds, and I think it's going to be different for each artist. Whatever the future holds, it's up to the artists to find those streams, and personalize them. There are objects and things and methods that are infinite, and I think for any artist that thinks the solution is practicing their bass, they're fucked, because playing a better bass isn't going to help you. It just isn't, because somebody else is playing a better bass. If that's all you're about, but if you're about you as a person, who was that group of kids singing in a library about your sexist?
Oh, right. I want to say it was. I want to say Karen, but no, it was something like that. It was
something like that.
Yeah.
And they were on Jimmy Fallon and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. They had their, as Sheep on Drugs would say, their 15 minutes of fame,
Yeah.
And so there are so many components to the thing called fame that a lot of people that haven't had it think they want it, without realizing what it is, how ridiculous it is, how bullshit it is. I was fortunate enough to be very successful at the age of 23 and have a worldwide hit with PIL, house in LA with a swimming pool and palm trees. And I got sick, and I couldn't work out what was going on. And I realized I was just unhappy. And then I quit the band at its height. That is still their biggest selling single. And I just quit. It was a situation I didn't want to be in. And so I would advise anybody who's thinking about succeeding to think for a week or a month or a year about what success actually means. Because when I succeeded, front cover of Melody Maker, John Peel, Old Grey Whistle Test, touring America, touring Japan, hit single, that was somebody else's idea of success. Right. I realize now it was the folklore. And so, think about that,
That is something that we talk a little bit about in the entrepreneurship, academics is, how do we define success? In research, typically success is just, what's your revenue, what's your profit? But in reality, we've always known that success really depends on the entrepreneur themselves and what they want, right? So, if somebody is happy having a mom and pop and, having their weekends off because they can close the store because they don't need the revenue, that's success. But in our studies, that would be, a failure. Right. So, yeah, I mean, definitely agree that the personal definition of success really matters. Right. But what I'm suggesting is that bands, artists start future-proof a little bit by demanding rights for things that aren't a thing right now. Like streaming, VR, I don't know what else, NFT, whatever, right? You'll start demanding those rights.
But the danger is,
Yeah.
that because some people, I have conversations with people, I'm thinking about a publicist. Why? Well, why? Because you read that in a book in 1982, and Andy Cernovich said, advertising is the cost of being boring. I'm just like, stop being boring and you won't need a publicist. You need a way of amplifying the signal. They're like, what do you say? They just want to hire a publicist because that's, well, I've hired a publicist. I'd love to talk to you for a bit longer, but I've got to go and talk to my publicist. It's our Thursday check-in. Some people just want to do that, but just realize that that's what you want to do. You want to pretend you're living in 92, and you think that somebody's going to have a cocktail with somebody else. And next thing you know, you're on the front cover of a magazine. And it's just not how it is. And so there are people who they'll latch onto your future. They're not future proofing themselves by acquiring future rights, because streaming, if there are 70,000 songs being uploaded each day, last year it was 40,000, then it was 60, now it's 70. So experience would tell us it will be 100,000 soon. So then live streaming, okay, all right, that's great, until there's 100,000 streams a minute. Then it's just that, I think future proofing is thinking, just coming up for air, turn the radar on, being aware, like looking at other industries and going, how are they dealing with this in hair cutting? How are they dealing with this problem in film, with books, with other stuff, And so, one of my reactions to streaming was we reissued the Pigface Gob album as double vinyl in reverse stock, but we hand screened the front cover, with glow in the dark ink, signed and numbered, and they sell for $60 each. So, and I'm not trying to save the world. If I sell 300, and we're in a second pressing, but 300 copies of that is $18,000, which is 4.5 million streams. I don't know how to get to 4.5 million streams.
Right.
But one of the ways to get there would be to sell 300 copies of this hand screen, signed and numbered, glow in the dark vinyl first. And now you've got, after your cost of goods, $18,000 to experiment with some approaches that might get you more, or carry on doing interesting things with objects. And maybe that will get you some coverage that will get you the streams. But once you stop being creative I think in a physical way, I think you unplug yourself from something. NFTs, amazing. It's digital, and now you get this digital thing and it ships with the physical copy of the thing. It's just like physical's dead. It's all in space. It's unbelievable. And once people are, oh my God, NFTs. Yeah. And it comes with the copy of the album. Like, oh, okay. It's like the album that comes with the download card. It's all the same. It's all the same stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree in terms of experimenting. I met Boy Harsher before they started becoming big and before they played the Cold Waves. They did a really small show here in Charleston, and so I sent a follow-up email with this long thing of advice, and I'm like, okay, so not being a music professional, but as a fan, I'll tell you that the bands that I've liked for decades are ones that are constantly evolving. They're constantly trying something new. You buy their albums and which one it is later on because they're distinct enough. I hate it when bands like they sound the same every album and you can't tell the difference anymore. Right? They found that one sound and they just trying to capitalize on it until they can't anymore.
Right. So I tell bands, weirdly, ironically, create the museum of you.
Hmm.
And so, and the idea behind that is, so maybe Boy Harsh's first show, they're expecting 10 people. And this, why would we do a poster, let alone a 3-screen signed glow in the dark poster on really nice paper with fluorescent inks because it's expensive. Well, you do that for all the people who aren't there.
Mhm.
You know, for 3 years down the line, it's a prize when you
Right.
get a new album, you get one of these posters. If you don't spend the time investing in yourself and your own future to be able to look at the past, then no fucker else is going to.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I'm spending my time looking at my process, you know, looking at things that I made 30, 40 years ago to be able to display them, and use those things in different ways to create spectacle, to create a vibe. And yeah, and if I not, and it doesn't make any sense on a spreadsheet. You know,
Mhm.
that's why my revenue streams class, the spreadsheet has vibe, social capital, and stories. You
Mhm.
know, that
Yeah.
are, you know, if you're not creating a story, then how is it? Why would
Yeah.
anybody tell the story of the whatever? And I think there's a definite retooling about commerce. You know, there's I forget the name of the person. There's a TED talk that I used in a lecture. Um, this guy bought 100 objects off of eBay for, I want to say, $200, and just shit, like this horse's head, uh, porcelain thing.
Yeah.
And he then hired storytellers, writers, to attach a story to each object. And he put the objects back on eBay and they sold for $8,000. So,
Yeah.
you know, I'm definitely on a mission to, having understood business and spreadsheets,
Mhm.
to now show people who are just being creative that there's a value to that. But and also to show business people that that you know, art and stories aren't frivolous. They are tools, you
Yeah.
know, and they can be used in different ways. Now, I use that information to justify creating huge pieces of scenery and creating spectacle, because that's
Yeah.
my jam. But you can also just use it to justify spending more money than you should on the posters for your first gig
Yeah.
and scenery and other
Or
stuff.
or simply charging more for something, right? Because it has a story to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I tried to tell my wife early on when she was first starting out, is that every piece she was making was unique because she was using recycled materials. She was taking wires and, you know, taking apart and making just the coolest stuff. But people were looking at it, it's like, okay, this is recycled materials. This should be cheap. I'm like, no, right? Do you have any idea how much creativity went into, how much work
Yeah.
went into this?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you know, make a story for each one, because
Mhm.
that's what people are going to buy.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and that, but that's a good point. I haven't really thought too much about the whole idea of story. I think I'm gonna have to incorporate that in my classes this semester. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean, it really
if
makes sense.
I'd be happy to zoom in on a class. I got
Oh yeah,
have a lot of information about stuff that you don't think you should do that ended up being really good.
yeah,
And I mean, I think about, speaking of jewelry, you know, Paul Ferguson from Killing Joke. Um, he's a silversmith, and he he made the pig face solid silver rings.
mm,
And you know, there's no shortage of people to do that. You know, it's a pig face logo,
right,
stick it on a ring. But I wanted him to do it, you know, and part of my request, along with the range of size of rings, is footage of him pouring the silver into the.
yeah,
I wanted
right,
that, you know, um, all of this stuff, you know. And I guess that's another great example for an artist, for a musician. There's Paul Ferguson. You know, there's youth from Killing Joke painting every afternoon in the alley, in
yeah,
the car park behind the venue. His paintings are still wet when the doors open. You know,
mm,
he's just expressing himself, and there's his poetry book. And it's just people doing this. You know, if you're just doing one thing, you're fucked.
Yeah.
It was so fun.
And this actually reminds me, I'm going to contact a student from last semester. He sells vintage concert t-shirts.
Okay.
Right. And you know, so the pitch that he made to our judges was that he has a mechanism for being able to determine whether or not something is actually vintage or not, which they all questioned, right? But I think if he can translate that instead of saying it's vintage, but telling the story behind it, like if he can, you know, buy it from somebody and say, okay, what concert, you know, when did you buy this? When, you know, what, you know, and then sell that, that would be a whole nother thing.
Right. I mean, that's the thing that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
You know, when I talked to Martin King about the hubcap marimba, and then Jim, my drum tech, was helping out, hanging some stuff. He's like, we went straight to the scrapyard. We didn't go to Invisible. They picked them up at the airport. They're like, we got to go straight to the scrapyard. And
Yeah.
that's what they did, you know. And now
Yeah.
the scrapyard is now condominiums, of course, you know, all of these stories, right?
Right.
And I said, I need a little story from you about this, from you, you
Yeah.
know, and so he's sending me the story. All of these objects, the CamLab Fuck Art Let's Kill shirt. It's like, I got the shirt. Thank you very much, Ned. I need the story. I want the context to all of this.
Yeah.
That's the important part.
Yeah.
And then the museum just simply becomes a vessel, just becomes an amplifier, just becomes like a relaxation device that pulls stories from whoever, whatever is in the room.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing.
Well, yeah. And now I think about it, you know, going back to music has been something that's been around forever. So has storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, cave drawings, right? There was probably cave music too.
Right.
And went along with those stories.
And there was music because it had the news set to song, and people would go around and sing stuff to each other. It's a way of remembering stuff, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's I definitely need to think. I've got 2 weeks left to get ready for the semester, so I got to think of how I'm going to incorporate this. But I would love to try and find a way to work with you, you know, between our classes in some way. I did kind of model, you know, from our talk last year and a half ago. I did have my students last semester organize events, and so what I was focused on at the time was women of color entrepreneurs. And so what I gave students a choice of working on 2 different projects, and one of them was to create an event. And I basically just gave them the task: figure out what it is that people want and create the event before the end of the semester. You know, so they set up like, you know, how are we going to do this? I'm like, all right, well, start talking to people, find out what they want. You know, so they ended up setting up just like a what do you call it? A focus group, you know, find out what people wanted and sort of, you know, pull that together and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And, you know, so how are you going to promote it? Like, so they, you know, worked on that. I mean, these weren't highly successful, but they're all recorded, so they can be used later. And it was a really good experience, I think, for the students to put on something, because to me, that's a entrepreneurial experience right there in a nutshell, right? You're creating something from nothing.
Yeah.
You know, when you have a product at the end, right?
That's the one of the things I see with class simulations and whatever is students, the problem becomes carving out a budget. You've got $10,000 to do this thing. Well, I've never had $10,000 to do anything. You know, so my problem is always, you've got nothing.
Exactly.
Now do something like what? You know, I can't think right now. I've got to deal with this and that. Yeah, well, while you're dealing with this and that, you'll never have the luxury that you have in school of like, your job is to sit and think about this stuff, to learn about stuff and absorb it. How luxurious to read a book. Oh my God. To have the time to read and absorb and learn, you know, wow.
Yeah. I mean, just I heard in another interview with you, you were talking about what you were hoping for in the future of 2021 is having time to read some books, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw an app that reads books to you. I think you have to photograph every page though,
oh wow.
and I'm sure it's a mess.
Not
But
Audible, but something else.
yeah, well, Audible is somebody has read them.
Yeah.
This is kind of like OCR.
Oh right. Yeah.
It's going to sound like your Waze app.
Yeah.
Turn left here, you know. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I want, before we get cut off in any way, I
Well,
want to ask
yeah.
you that last question that I always
Okay.
ask people, which is, what gives you hope?
Um, People, like, so just ideas and just amazing shit, like Day, uh, you know, just putting out music and driving around and helping people, and or Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace, you know, the $100 mixtape, just like audacious creativity, you know, like the $100 mixtape. What the fuck? That's doomed, really. Well, Jay-Z just bought 10 or whatever.
Mm.
Now, what's he going to do next? The $1,000? Yeah, he just did that. You know, that the ability for people to do amazing shit and be supported and inspire others and then re-inspire, that gives me hope. Like um the creativity of kids, and that, I think that's why I get pissed off when I feel that people are locking into the old paradigm
Mm.
and that labels are evil. It's like, oh, are there even any, you know, um that whole thing. um just look around and do the next thing. Don't
Mhm.
worry about doing the last thing, you know. But people give me hope. People absolutely give me hope. Like
Great.
the
Yeah.
people at Dark Matter Coffee, they're fucking crazy. They're making coffee, and just like Zappos weren't selling shoes, and I forget the example, the other example you used. Sure, they're selling coffee, but they're selling vibe. And they took me
Right.
to Tokyo, and they're working with, they're releasing vinyl and cassettes and collaborating on a beer with Mastodon and Three Floyds Brewery, and just fucking creativity
Yeah.
on speed, well, or on caffeine actually,
Yeah.
right? And that, like
Yeah.
the seemingly endless capacity for people to create and triumph in the face of adversity,
Yeah.
that's the hopeful stuff. Like,
Yeah.
really, whoa, you know. And stuff comes around for me, um, and rings a bell for me sometimes when I might be like, you know, at a low point. It's like, whoa, really? Somebody does something and something happens that just like, fuck, lifts me up. The
Mhm.
ability for people to lift each other up, should they choose to do so,
Mhm.
is enormous.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so tragic, and when people choose not to, you know.
Well, I think that's brilliantly said. Um, uh, that goes back to my point of making it more possible for people to experiment and eliminate the fear of failure, to try things, because that's the number one thing I think that holds people back from anything, is that fear of failure.
It's
And we
really,
teach that too much in school.
I was just going to say, it's really
Yeah.
tough to do, you know,
Yeah.
because there are, I'm aware of some uh, instructional techniques that are all about let a grade drop, and it strikes fear into a traditional student,
Right.
and it makes it very difficult for me to, fuck grades. There's no grade. I mean, there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll have you shit your pants over this live event we're doing, you know, and there'll be a grade, but there isn't. And fuck grades. Just
Yeah.
to be able to say that for a week, and but then when other people are taking a very different approach and perpetuating this idea. I mean, I did really badly at school, and I share my report with my students.
Mhm.
C plus F, disappointing, lacks needs to concentrate, lacks ability. Like, I mean, it's really horrible,
Yeah.
and that's what some people are still doing to students,
Mhm.
destroying people.
Yeah. Yeah. Grading is the way of grading is typically not rewarding, but penalizing. It's how can I take off points so that I have a grade distribution where I'm not going to get in trouble for giving away too many A's.
Right.
Because I've been getting in trouble for giving away too many A's, but that's because I don't do that. I use a method. It's called specifications grading. And it basically, the idea is that a student's grade is based on how much work they've done, as long as it meets a minimum level of quality. Right. And I just call that good enough. Right. As long as they do enough work that's good enough, and they do enough of them, the more they do, the higher grade they get. So if they want a high grade, it's not how much they can memorize for an exam and forget a week later. It's how much work and effort are they willing to put in, because ultimately it's the experience that they're learning from, not the, memorizing a textbook.
Right. And so I have trouble, some students want a rubric.
Mhm.
It's like 500 words, 600 words is to do this, do that, and I'll just say, don't be shit. Just don't be lame.
Yeah.
Don't be shit. And that's very difficult for some students to
Oh
deal
yeah,
with.
it is. It's very hard because that's kind of how my grading is, I usually will give them a word count, right? So that at least they can do that. But then there's something else, like it has to represent, the purpose, or, there should be something from the reading in this, right? And then, but the thing is, I give them a chance to revise, right? There's never a fail on an assignment. It's either good enough, or it's a revise.
Interesting. Yeah.
And students at first hated it because they're used to gaming the system, and they couldn't game this system, right? They actually had to do the work. But now they're starting to realize that, if I put in more work, I'm going to get a better grade. I don't have to really focus on being, number one in the class. I just have to focus on just doing the work and learning from the experience. So that's the thing I want them to do, is I want them to focus more on what they're doing than on how well they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I say to them, if they're doing a research and presentation on a record label or an artist, I'm like, you can be on whoever you want, but just could you make it interesting for me?
Mm-hmm.
And now now they're thinking of almost of me as a client. Well, what would interest mine? And can you make sure that you don't all do 4 of you do a presentation on the same period of hip hop? Just to show me something that's interesting, that I can be like, oh, holy crap. Because, the other part of this, which also isn't common, I still talk to my students from 18 years ago, and so there's my family, and then there's my students. Well, there's my family, my band, and then there's, my students. And I'm here as a sounding board a month after you graduated, 10 years after you graduate. I'm here if you want to come and sit and get involved in something, or run something by me. I'm still here doing shit. And, and I'll still be, I mean, I give all my students my cell number, but I'll still be here for you, but not as enthusiastic if I've spent time at school reminding you about an assignment. Like if you're treating me like an alarm clock, it's difficult for me to feel like I'm inspiring you and taking you to another level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do have to I do
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to call it a day.
Yo, that's
Uh,
fine. This was an hour more than I was supposed to have. So
but
I
and
very much appreciate it.
it's really interesting to talk to you about all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd be very happy to zoom in. And I've got a uh, couple of things I could present that might be good for your entrepreneurship class, and
Oh yeah,
show a different. I'd be happy
absolutely.
to do that.
In the projects that students do, there's almost always at minimum one team that's doing something that's music related.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
definitely.
music business strategies
Yeah.
outside of music business kick ass. So one of my students from SAE, I'm like, hey, what's going on? She helped do VIPs at House of Blues in 2016 for me, and also worked at a couple of record labels and whatever. And she's like, well, I'm in real estate now. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, the stuff I taught you didn't work out. She's like, oh, no, no, no. I've got 7 closings this week and it's all your shit. It's all music business shit. And I'm kicking ass, you know? So there's all kinds of,
Yeah.
we had an intern who took all of our ideas and transformed a dental practice.
Nice.
You know, so you just
Yeah.
start treating your
Yeah.
customers
Yeah.
like fans and
Yeah.
treating your brand like it's a band and doing all the stuff, and it's good.
Cool.
Okay, thanks, Dave. It's nice to talk to you.
Well, yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna